Welcome to the Unlist. Today we're talking about a house that doesn't really get any attention from the YouTube circuit of content creators, not usually. Maybe individual perfumes may get little videos here and there, and I think most of this brand's attention comes in the form of officially published articles and such. But the brand, obviously, from the thumbnail and the title of the video, you already know, it's Chris Collins. And no, we're not talking about the sportscaster, Chris Collins, all right, from ESPN. He is not making fragrances. That is not the kind of guy who would make fragrances. This Chris Collins is actually a former male model, a fashion model from Harlem. And he has had appearances in several different fashion magazines. He's most closely tied to Vogue, which I know is interesting because Vogue is typically female readership, but he's had a great number of opportunities within the Vogue magazine. I guess they like eye candy too, right? But the thing is, Chris Collins is sort of straddling the line between influencer and celebrity perfume brand, because he's not really an influencer. He doesn't have a fragrance YouTube. He doesn't write reviews. He doesn't push out content, but he is a collector and a self-professed perfume nerd. So he is kind of like the guy who obviously has money because fashion model and enjoyed collecting fragrances, wearing fragrances, and I'm sure he has opinions of fragrances, but he never put himself out there in that way. Wasn't something he ever decided to do with himself after his modeling career came to an end. Instead, he chose to launch a fragrance brand, I guess, because he had the passion for it. So the Chris Collins brand kind of snuck onto the market with very little fanfare right around 2017. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of YouTube influencers and the usual suspects haven't done much content related to Chris Collins is he doesn't give away freebies. He doesn't stoke the fires like Parfums de Marly and Initio. Doesn't court them in the same way that Navitus has, Raja Dove. Doesn't really play that whole let's get down in the community and try and either be a part of it or capitalize on it, right? Sort of rubs me a bit as a George Zaharoff type, where he comes from another business, where in George Zaharoff's case it was fashion and accessories, and he also had a vested interest in fragrances, collecting fragrances, using them. Likewise, sort of like George, Chris didn't have any interest in putting out reviews and videos, but he wanted to get involved, and he wanted to make fragrances that are for people who enjoy fragrances, which unfortunately means they are exclusive and they have a high price tag because they're not meant to be sold in your place where the average Joe shops. These aren't perfumes made to be chick magnets or club bangers or panty droppers or any of that other bullshit. Okay, he makes fragrances according to his curated tastes based on the perfumes he's collected and worn in his life. Which I'm guessing is a similar stroke to George Zaharoff, where a lot of George Zaharoff's fragrances are either fragrances from his own personal taste, or he does get involved with influencers. He does give influencers their own perfume lines. He's done things with a handful of them. I mean, he's done a couple of things with Ross. He's done something with Curly Scents. So, it's a bit of a hybrid thing in that way. Chris Collins is a bit of a hybrid thing. The difference being that Chris does not get involved directly with influencers and content creators. He just puts his stuff out there. But it has a similar feel. Okay, that's what I'm getting at. Similar feel where it's a fragrance lover with a lot of money launching his own line with perfumes that are made according to his own curated taste. The kind of thing that a lot of us would do if we had that kind of money. Obviously, a lot of us, if we were rich, right, if we had fashion careers or modeling careers or careers in any successful business and we had cool millions in the bank, we were able to get either investment in from some other place or put up some of our own cash, launch our own fragrance ranges. Likewise, it'd also probably be very expensive and exclusive because you sort of have to be, right? When you're creating a line that is directly tailored to a person that buys perfume as a hobby interest, that wears perfume as a sort of connoisseur person versus the average Joe who just wants to smell good or whatever and go to work, right? You're selling to that really invested buyer. Then obviously you can't mark your stuff down to $75 and sell it in Kohl's or whatever, or stick it on an end cap at Walmart. That's just not going to work for you. So that's a bit of a drag, honestly, because of the Chris Collins fragrances I smelled, a lot of them are pretty good. Pretty good. They are pretty good fragrances. But the price point and the quantity that you get for the price you pay ends up being for me, obviously. Because he's selling these things at about $180 for a 50 ml bottle. Put this into perspective for you. When you buy an independent, handmade, artisanal perfume, where the perfumer themselves are making the perfume, bottling the perfume, and selling it to you directly, that's a product that you're going to pay about $200 for to get 50 ml, or sometimes they're a little more generous and it might be $250 for 100 ml. But like I said, you're breaking at that price per ounce, price per milliliter, you're breaking into artisanal independent perfume prices. So you're breaking into Tower and Rogue and Darren Allen and Clandestine Laboratories. You're breaking into price points for like some of the more entry-level Bortnikov stuff. Okay, guys, that's what I'm talking about. Papillon perfumes. So that's a hard sell. And the reason why I say this, with no disrespect to Chris Collins, obviously, is that he is still making very much commercial perfumes that are coming from commercial perfume labs, from commercial perfumers. So he has perfumers like Jerome Epinette working with them, Nathalie Feistauer, Sedone Lancessia, if I'm saying her name properly. So we're talking about perfumers who work for big chem houses, that work for big oil houses. And he's using commercial materials, commercial perfumers. He is not making the stuff himself, bottling it himself, and putting it out there himself. He is taking on the same role as a Rajadov, right? Taking on the same role as a Raymond Salmon, or formerly Christopher Cheong of Amouage. He's taking on that kind of role, okay? He's taking on the role of a creative director. Similar way to Eugen from Les Abstraits. And those perfumes are a much better deal because, again, they are 100 ml for about $200. So you're basically getting half that with the Chris Collins line. You're getting half of what Eugen will sell you for the same price, which, again, would be maybe doable if these were handmade with natural materials or materials that are created by hand, extracted from natural sources, and a combination of synthetics. But the craftsmanship and the attention to detail and the time was put in there. That would make it worth that price to me. But when you're working with the industry, even if it's a smaller batch run, I get it, smaller batch run, smaller production run, you got to have a higher margin because the cost is higher when you're not scaling up as big. But the counter argument to that, is it's in Nordstrom, it's in Sephora, it's in Neiman Marcus, it's in a lot of places, Oswald's, Lucky Scent. It's in the high-end boutique stores that you find in major cities like New York City, like Los Angeles. Okay, I don't know if the stuff makes it overseas. I don't know if it's in London yet or Paris, but it's out there. And it's not super difficult to find. I wouldn't call Chris Collins mainstream on the same level that, like, obviously Creed is, okay, not mainstream in the same way that MFK is, but he's definitely punching into that level of distribution. So we're talking Byredo, we're talking Xerjoff, we're talking MFK, we're talking Comme des Garçons, all right? And when you're talking that distribution footprint and that price per milliliter, right? You're breaking into a luxury market now. Because again, these aren't artisanal, these aren't handmade. You're breaking into a luxury market, but you're offering perfumes that are of a more commercial style. And even though a lot of those luxury perfumes can also be very commercial, despite them telling you they're not, right? Obviously, they try to lie to you on that. But it ends up just becoming this uncomfortable gray area, right? Because you're getting stuff that feels like it should be either twice the amount or half the price for what you're getting. Or it should be a lot more unique, a lot more strange and weird, and just own that I'm trying to be a niche brand, I'm trying to be something different, right? Own that. But then you play it safe and you keep it in that commercial pocket, but you don't quite commit to the luxury either. You don't go full super heavy brass caps, super heavy brass plates, silk everywhere, you know, rhinestones on the cap. So it's like you're in this weird area where you've got like 1 foot in luxury and you've got 1 foot in niche, and then you're priced more on the luxury side of things, but your perfumes feel more like you're treading the same water as popular niche and designer brands. So you're kind of doing the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but ain't none of those degrees really hitting it off all that well either. So that is not necessarily a negative thing, in the sense that there could be a buyer for that. Obviously, there could be somebody who wants that. They want, you know, a little bit of luxury with a little bit of niche with a little bit of commercial appeal. And they want the exclusivity of having a brand that a lot of people haven't even heard of, yet they also like the fact that even though it's exclusive and not very well known, it's also very easy to find and purchase. So it's exclusive in theory, but not in practice. So there's a buyer for that. Clearly there's a buyer for that. I don't know where that buyer is, obviously, but there's a buyer for it. Now, a little more context about the brand. Pricing and market placement gripes aside, I will say I enjoy the theme of the house, okay? Chris Collins does something very unique, and I don't want people to think I'm bashing this house for 12 minutes so far, but he does bring something unique to the table that should not be overlooked, and that's the theme. And the theme is he's trying to really help teach people about the Harlem Renaissance and the general contributions that Black Americans have made to the tapestry of art and luxury and other facets. And that stuff gets way overlooked in the perfume industry. Way, way, way overlooked, because we are constantly obsessed with the French and all that they've done for the centuries, right? And if we're not obsessed with the French, then we're obsessed with kings and queens and pretending that our perfumes were made for nobles who there's no historical data to back that up, right? Or we do the thing where it's like, oh, well, the mysteries of the Persian Gulf, the ancient civilizations of Babylon. We need to figure out what King Solomon was wearing as a perfume, and then that whole thing. So if we're not really digging up Orientalism 2.0, right, exoticism 3.0, then we're doubling and tripling down on the French again and again with the Sun King and Louis XV or whatever, or Napoleon's underpants, right? And that gets tiring. That gets really, really tiring. There's only so many perfume brands I can stomach that are Napoleon's underpants, okay? I'm getting a little sick of the Napoleon's underpants perfumes. I don't want any more of those, all right? I don't even like Napoleon all that much. Napoleon Dynamite's cool. I like him. and his tater tots, but I don't know about the actual Napoleon. Not a big fan. So when you come from a place that's not celebrated, you come from a place that is not shown a light on, right? Then I can appreciate that. So like I said, all of the market placement and price gripes aside, I know I started off the video with that, but I gotta be honest. I gotta be honest, okay? Cannot pull the punches here. And if Chris Collins watches my YouTube channel and he's made it this far into the video, he was able to stomach 12 minutes of me griping about his prices and everything else, and the fact that his fragrance taste seems very pedestrian. Sorry, dude, it kind of does, but the theming is definitely on point. And I feel like we need fragrances that sort of back that up a little more, right? Because I too studied the Harlem Renaissance. I too went to public schools, and luckily I paid attention and learned something. I know about various periods in American history, okay? And I understand how important that scene was, especially for New York, okay? Especially for New York. And there's a whole wealth of stuff there that has not been tapped. Bond number 9, right? Bond number 9 goes on about New York, New York, New York. They name all of their fragrances after streets in New York. They've got a fragrance called New Harlem, but that's it. That's it. That's all they got. So they have not really touched anything in that particular area. And, you know, there's just so much. And you could just go on and on about it. You could talk about the jazz age, too, and the jazz scene that was there. You could talk about all that stuff, right? All of that pre-World War II stuff. You could really dig in. You could build a whole house around that. And I feel like Chris Collins is trying to. I feel like he's trying to. But he's just missing the mark because the perfumes feel too commercial, too safe, right? And that's the rub. Because they're too commercial, they're too safe, and they're too expensive for what you get in the bottle. So it's like, I wouldn't mind paying $200 for 50 mil if it was some really realistic depiction of a smoky jazz club, right? If it was like that, yeah, you can't get that anywhere else. I feel like that'd be worth it, okay? You know? You want to make a perfume that's all about Cab Calloway? I would buy that shit. I would buy a Cab Calloway perfume, guys. I would. But no, we're not doing that. What we are doing is generic rose oud fragrances. Okay? Like Long Kiss Goodnight. We're doing fragrances that basically copy Xerjoff perfumes, like Sweet Taboo. Smells like it could be Golden Villa or Golden Maca or whatever, right? Those from the Coffee Break series that Xerjoff has. We've got stuff like what else did I sample? We've got stuff like African Rooibos. Now I like that perfume. I gave that a thumbs up in my written review, but I gotta admit, it does smell very much like Cartier Declaration, maybe mixed with like a bit of Jean Charles Broussard Tébrun, okay, a little bit of that, a little bit of Thé Rouge by Bulgari, you know, the Olivier Polish fragrance. So it's still that very commercial, and I love Declaration, and I love Thé Rouge. Those are great fragrances, but they're commercial. And when I smell that, I get the Rooibos Accord in there, like I get it, but then the rest of it is like, okay, Declaration. See what I'm saying? Like that's what I'm talking about. It's just too much in that safe space. It's too in the safe space. And then beyond that, it's like, well, okay, so you've got that stuff. And then there's also like Harlem Nights. And Harlem Nights is just basically by Killian. It's straight to heaven. So Harlem Nights is straight to heaven, but take straight to heaven and add more patchouli in it. So more patchouli, make it a bit smokier. It's by Killian. And it's funny because Chris Collins also went to visit Killian Hennessy, right? So see, that's why I'm like, okay, I see what you're doing here. You made a fragrance that smells like your favorite by Killian because you Mr. Collins probably like Straight to Heaven. It's probably one of your favorites. So you went ahead and you made your own version of it. And then you went and you talked to Killian Hennessy and sat down with him and you guys discussed it. Well, here's my version of your fragrance. And we're all rich and we're all famous. We can do what we want, right? It's great. But it doesn't speak to me in regards to anything related to New York City, let alone Harlem or the Bronx or Brooklyn or anywhere in New York City. And I've been there many, many times, okay? So I know. I don't smell that fragrance and go, oh, this is evocative of Harlem Nights. I just smell this and go, by Killian. I go, Straight to Heaven. And that's bad. For me personally, that's bad. I feel like you've got a good presentation and a good theme and a good historical lean. And the perfumes also don't smell cheap either. They don't smell like crap, guys. They just smell very safe. And they smell like they came from the industry, from the perfumers that he hired to do them. So it's like, okay, this is a Jerome Epinette fragrance. I don't feel anything outside of that commercial, oversaturated luxury niche pocket, right? They're just too dialed in. Now, there's a couple outliers, obviously. You know, one of the outliers is a surprising one. It's actually one of the least historical smelling ones. It has no real, in my opinion, no real relation to Harlem at all. It's called Lost in Paradise. It came out a couple years ago, 2022. Chris Collins did a collection of perfumes that was more or less based around like the tropics, around exotic locales. And Lost in Paradise was basically sort of his version of a tropical, like a Virgin Island water style fragrance, you know, something along those lines. Walk on the Beach by Maison Margiela Replica, something like that. Tahitian Waters by English Laundry. So it's got florals, it's got coconut notes in it, it's got some nice salty, briny stuff in the base. It feels appropriately tropical, and it also feels like it's worth the money of that price point, but that's like the outlier. Because again, it has no relation whatsoever to really the theme of the house, the history that surrounds the house, the whole point. So it's mixed feelings, guys. I have mixed feelings about this brand. I see so much potential in it, right? I see that what could be fixed, and this is all my opinion. If you love Chris Collins, by all means, buy them. I'd much rather you wear Chris Collins than anything, you know, that most like Naxos, whatever, right? That's so definitely support an independent brand over a giant mega corporation. You support Chris Collins as an independent brand. It's not L'Oreal, right? I'd rather you support him than support L'Oreal for sure. But my point is, there's just so much potential there. But potential is just that. So anyways, that is my review on the House of Chris Collins. Let me know your experiences in the comments, if you know about this brand or not, what you think of their perfumes. And if you've got disagreeing takes, it's fine. Just keep them polite. And I'll catch you next time.